Welcome back to the Enchanted Inkwell. I'm Michael.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Blake.
And I unquit. I'm here.
She decided that quitting over something as silly as Plu being correct was not the
I
right
quit
note.
again. Convince me to come back.
It's still called Plu,
Plu.
so I don't know. I don't know how we're going to convince you to come back.
I don't know.
We have receipts.
It's true. We ran the poll, and if you haven't taken the poll yet on Spotify, it might be closed. But I put a poll on Spotify to see if
You put a Spotify poll up?
to see if Plu or
You
Blurple was correct.
menace.
And I imagine that Plu will win again, as it is the clear favorite and the clear correct answer.
I'm being set up. Check the votes.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm the only Spotify
I was
listener.
gonna say, Mike has just voted for Plu 7 times. It's like one unique visitor to the poll.
one unique visitor. Oh, email Mike1 at Mike2. All right.
Yeah.
Sus. No, also, welcome back. Well, thanks for unquitting.
You're very welcome.
It was too awkward when it was just me and Blake for that one episode. I don't think we could survive. just the two of us.
Well, you're giving me more leverage for when I
Contract disputes.
Yeah, exactly. When I negotiate my contract for the next season.
All right. Well, we are here. This will air right before Seattle, the Thursday before DLC Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in whatever tradition or whatever traditions that we might have, we should probably maybe touch on the Seattle meta a little bit. I don't think there's going to be a big change from like Vegas or Birmingham. If we're judging by locals, Emerald Steel has gained a little bit of popularity, but Emerald Amethyst, we need a better name for that, has gained a lot of popularity.
Glurple? Glurple. I've coined it.
I just want to call it Amy.
Amy.
Oh, AME, like AM
Amem.
dash E.
Am-
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Like AM dash capital E. That's
yeah,
not
yeah,
bad.
Amethyst Emerald.
Yeah.
yeah.
So that has gained a lot of share in our local meta.
I like Glurple, for the record.
We'll put up a poll for this episode. AM dash E or Glurple.
Glurple.
And then, we'll see. Maybe your supporters will rally behind you this time and not betray you with Plu.
Venmo, $1 for every Glurple vote.
Ooh. I don't know if you can. Yeah, leave a comment
Right.
you voted for Glurple with your Venmo handle so that
This is not legally binding.
Brick can go broke.
I just don't understand where
Joke's on you.
the L comes in from Glurp. Wouldn't it be like Glurple?
Because I want a Glurple.
She's just so upset about
Glurple comes from the L of Clarabelle.
not
Exactly. Right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But I could actually be behind a Gurple.
I like a Gurple. Yeah, I maybe put an L in there unnecessarily, but I like Gurple.
Greeple?
Oh, Gurple.
So we're going to spend an hour trying to figure out the
Gurple.
name for this.
Welcome
I
to the
love
episode.
Welcome to my brain.
This would work much better as a live stream where we get live feedback instead of just bouncing off of each other for an hour. And
feel free to comment on any of the platforms as to what fun names do you have for the ink combinations. We're definitely up for suggestions.
I was at DLC Vegas and I said something about ketchup mustard and someone looked at me and like squinted. I was like, do you not call it ketchup mustard?
Right, Baja Blast.
I was like, you call it Baja Blast though, right? And what was the other one? Blurple, as
Plu.
Disney intended.
I don't think so. If Disney intended Blurple, we would get hit with so many copyright trademark disputes right now.
So
warning.
hot take and truly controversial. I fundamentally have a problem with Ruby Amethyst,
Because
being
Amethyst comes first.
Yes,
Amethyst
right.
Ruby.
I totally get the how it rolls off the tongue way better. Ruby Am. I totally understand that.
Sure.
But there is that functional feeling of Amethyst comes before Ruby, which is why Blue is correct and not Blurple. Because blue isn't even an ink color.
There's
What if I just
Sapphire
call it?
is.
What if I just call it jelly now? Because
Jelly.
it's purple jelly, red jelly.
No, somebody
jelly.
called something peanut butter jelly, and I was like,
Oh, there's no peanut.
Yellow
there's no-
red?
no, yellow purple. They called it peanut butter jelly. I was like, what?
Mustard jelly?
No, they're insisting peanut butter is amber. This person, I was like, what deck are you talking about?
What-
And they looked at me and they were like, duh, amber amethyst. I was like, in what universe is amethyst?
I
There's
don't know.
amber peanut butter.
I call that one Yerple aggro.
What peanut butter are you eating?
Jasmine, take the carpet.
Yeah, please don't eat yellow peanut butter. That doesn't sound very good. For
I
your
think
health.
it's just the closest. I don't know. Yeah, I couldn't. But ruby amethyst, that is where I had finally succumbed to peer pressure, and that is the thing that I use. I was using amethyst ruby for the same reason for a while, and then I was just sick of
Fighting it.
being the only one who put amethyst first.
So that means we've got Blue in the bag.
No.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah. No.
I know that I'm more stubborn than her,
No.
so
Didn't-
she will get sick of fighting it at some
I said
point.
ruby amethyst. I succumbed to ruby amethyst, so that means Blurple is right.
You
because
succumbed?
it's the same thing.
Plurple?
It's
You-
the same thing. If it's ruby amethyst, then it's Blurple.
No, you succumbed to Ruby Amethyst because you gave in because you decided not to fight anymore. I will never stop fighting for Blue. So if one of us is gonna give in, it's gonna be you.
Oh, I'm a double fire sign, baby. Let's run it.
Well, all right.
Let's run it.
All right. I'm open to the challenge.
With a Virgo rising.
We will outlast.
Send it.
Plu
Let's
will,
go.
Plu will outlast. My desire for Plu will outlast your will for Blurple.
Hi, welcome to the Enchanted Inkwell. I'm your host, Blake. The other two are having a blast.
We have a side podcast, and it's just us fighting about things that we feel very strongly about.
Oh, I can't. This is gonna be terrible. I can't think of the. It's like Looney Tunes, like rabbit season, duck season, rabbit season, duck season. Like Blue, purple, Blue, Blurple.
I was going to make a Roadrunner joke. So going back to what we were talking about, which was our Seattle prediction. So number one,
yeah.
because I'm going out of town, we're a little early, right? Like we would ordinarily be doing this a little bit closer to when Seattle
Sure,
happens.
yeah.
My bad. I'm going to see a show. But
Me too.
yeah, right. Oh, also, yeah. I'm not the only one out of town that weekend. But we're in like the thick of set champ season, but I don't think I've missed any big non-set champ. Like people aren't hosting like 10Ks or 5Ks or any big tournaments right now, right? I haven't missed like a big meta shift or anything.
So at the risk of sounding completely unprepared for this podcast, as I am normally,
Us? Me?
no,
Never.
there was a 30,000 euro tournament that took place.
Oh, snap.
I overheard it on another podcast that happened in Europe somewhere. I did not see the breakdown of that, so I don't know what happened there.
I actually watched part of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was being streamed live.
Okay.
And I think I was like prepping for one of our podcasts. And I was like, oh, it's late. Oh, what's he streaming about? So I found out there are some tournaments that are out there, but the meta has not specifically there's been no rogue deck to show up and be like, hey, I'm new in town and I'm taking up space.
Got it. And we've noticed that the meta with EU versus NA has been different too. So even if it was at the risk of sounding dismissive, because I'm not trying to be, I don't know that I would necessarily think that Seattle meta would shift significantly if there was a meta shift in an EU 30K.
Maybe not, but I do think that I do think that it could influence it a little bit.
For
right?
sure. Yeah. Especially if it was some like wacky rogue deck.
Sure.
They would see more.
And I think that we have like Emerald, Steel, Zan winning the Vegas, right?
Sure.
And so we've seen like kind of resurgence in popularity. So that has me kind of wondering a little bit if other decks kind of will shift in and out of popularity due to that, right? Like we haven't really been seeing a lot of Blue Steel at all, but one really well-known Blue Steel pilot took down a SCG 1K actually won the whole thing with Blue Steel, and Blue Steel's pretty well positioned against Emerald Steel, so maybe that will gain some ground a little bit. You know, if the Ruby Sapphire players are feeling like, for whatever reason, uneasy about their aggro matchup, you know, if there's a decline in that, then Blue Steel could probably take a good share of, you know, higher finishes. I don't know. Like, do we know? Have we seen on Twitter whether or not Din is attending Seattle? Because if he is, I'm gonna take him as my my forerunner of who's gonna win that. That's gonna be the horse that I take.
That's your guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's just done so well in all
Yeah.
of the GLCs that he's gone to. He's just a consistent contender, and you know, he understands his deck inside and out, and so I would not be surprised to see him with another day two, with another top finish, another invite potentially. Stop stealing our invites.
He's not.
I guess our
They drop down.
Oh, okay, all right,
Yeah.
all right.
So
keep winning the Mickeys then. Get your play set. Does he have a play set?
No.
Okay, get your play set. I'm for it, but play them.
Oh, you're a menace. A menace. I would love to see Zan do well again. I don't know if Zan's going. I haven't been checking like the Lorcana sphere on social media, unfortunately, which is at the risk of sounding unprepared for the podcast. It just was trying to get ready for the trip and stuff like that. It would be nice to see Ruby Amethyst. I think, yeah. Jesus. I didn't ask you. No, I'm just kidding. With Green Steel bumping up, I would say that I would expect to see Ruby Amethyst go down. I don't think that's the case, just based on set championships. It might be our local meta. It might be everybody's meta. There are still so many Ruby Amethyst on Ruby Amethyst mirror matches in competitive play right now. So I mean, I don't think Ruby Amethyst is really going to go anywhere. It's a question of how much maybe Gerpel sticks around though.
So interestingly enough, and we weren't really we've had designs to talk about this for feels to be like 3, maybe even 4 episodes at this point in time, but bringing up the Amethyst Ruby mirror matches really does kind of push us into the 2-game format aspect, because when we talk about the Amethyst Ruby mirror match, it is so grindy. She gave me the like the raised eyebrow, like squinty of like, how dare you call it Amethyst?
No.
So, but
that was a pure coincidence. There was a car outside, and also I was trying to follow what you're saying because I got distracted by the car. That was a concentration face, not a judgment. Not a judgment. Yeah, that was a Dory moment for sure.
It was so good though.
It was my look of concentration. I swear to God.
But the thing is, having to play the mirror match, especially when you're trying to fight through 3 games, is you've played Ruby Amethyst enough to know, right? Like your husband has played Ruby Amethyst. I've played Ruby Amethyst. It's not fun. Mirror match is just like the most grindy, unenjoyable game. And it's either one way or the other. It's like one person just runs away with it, or you're stuck playing for way too long.
I'm going to challenge that premise. The premise that it's grindy and unenjoyable. When I am sitting across from someone I enjoy playing, not a stranger, but like one of our friends, I love a good chess match level Ruby Amethyst game, as long as I am not trying to get 3 games in 50 minutes.
And
therein lies the issue.
And that's why I brought up the 2-game format, because I think that fixes it. It's way easier to just do 2 games.
Joke's on you. It's always 2 games if you have to go to time with Ruby Amethyst. But yeah, I mean, overall, that's what they're shooting for, right? But
I mean, I think it's right. Like, it is an efficiency type play, right? Because at the DLCs, when they go to that 2-game format, they go from a 50-minute round to 40 minutes, right?
45.
45. So you do save a little bit of time, which then like lets you squeeze in potentially more rounds if you need more rounds down the line, right? If the tournaments are larger, you can get in more rounds. I also think that it also lets you have the benefit of that lunch break, which some people find like are super welcome to it. Personally, I would just like to grind through the day, but we've heard the opinion that a lot of people really enjoyed having that break. But I think an interesting thought is like, how do you feel? Because I'm going to direct this at Blake because you haven't attended a deal or played in a 2-game format tournament quite yet. Yeah. But how did you feel like playing in it? Does it change the way you want to play the game at all? In a competitive environment? Do you like it? Did you like it? Did you not like it?
So as a whole, I thought it was tremendously positive. Okay. I liked it. There are just those games where you mulligan, you get a slightly bad hand or maybe even a terrible hand, and you just kind of give up and you're like, oh, okay, like I'll play this out, but really we're just going to go to the next game, with the 2-game format, every game matters. So you're forced to make decisions even with bad hands. And I had this one match specifically where I thought for sure, like I was sunk, like it was not the best matchup to begin with for me. And I had a terrible hand going. I think I missed ink on like turn 3.
Okay.
And yet I still ended up winning that game because my opponent also had a bad hand, and it was just a matter of like who was going to get there first. And it just so happened that my deck, being Ruby Sapphire, just had a better top end, so that once I got to really top decking, I was able to pull it out. And then but from a match to match aspect, I actually really enjoyed it. Right. It was just so nice to know that you were in it for 2 games. You had to do your best for the 2 games. Like, it's a competitive aspect thing, right? It's not this like, oh, I'm taking variance and I'm going to just lean heavy on winning a die roll. Yeah. I'm going to like actually try and win both games, whether I'm on the draw or the play.
Right. And I think I kind of felt very similar to that. Going into Dallas, I was not super hot on the format. It was brand new to me, having, not ever played a 2-game format in any other game before. I was pretty skeptical about it. I was like, why don't you just do something that's tried and true? And like, why are we doing this? And, so I didn't really have super positive vibes going into it, but after playing most of Dallas and talking with some friends there, I think I've changed my tune as well. I think that like I do enjoy it. I think it is very interesting to view it as, like, hey, we have to win. We have to win both games if possible. Like, never count yourself out. Like, don't just go to the next game. And I think something that I also kind of realized, or maybe it's just my bad luck, blaming bad luck or whatever, but playing in these last few set champs, I haven't won a die roll in probably a month. And
wow.
And so it is. And I don't think that's, I legitimately don't think that that's exaggeration. Like, I have not won a die roll in the longest time. And I think that, in like the,
did you forget your weighted dice?
I don't actually have weighted dice. I just don't know how to roll dice.
You're like, mechanically, this is
I don't know what I'm doing
fuzzy.
here.
I'm still very fuzzy on I just throw them at the people. They get super angry. It's so weird.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, fine, you win. I don't know what I'm doing. You win. No, but what I did find was that it didn't feel good to just be like, okay, I'm only on play on the game itself right now. Lorcana, it's a little tough to win on the draw for a lot of decks, especially with like the way aggro decks are positioned, in my opinion. And so, that lean of like, oh, it's not truly like 50-50 if you're on the play or on the draw or whatever. And so it like feels pretty bad to suffer 2 games on the, like I'm playing best of 3. I won the one that I was on the play, and then like I lost 2 other ones that I was on the draw, that kind of deal. And so like I think the 2-game format does like a good job of really balancing that aspect, either inadvertently or inadvertently, on purpose or inadvertently. I don't think advertently is a word.
Editor Mike, check the Google.
That they went to this 2-game format to balance that play draw disparity is what I actually kind of find very cool about the format, where you kind of balance that out, and it just doesn't really matter who wins the die roll. You just kind of got to make your deck win both.
Right. And I think when they announced it as well, right, going to this 2-game format, there was a lot of data, right? There was receipts on how bad that disparity was.
Okay.
And I don't think the disparity is as bad as it was back in set 3. I think they've closed the gap a bit, right?
Sure.
There's certain decks obviously will always have an advantage going on the play. But I don't necessarily think that that's the universal truth at this point in time. And it certainly isn't like a 70-30.
Right. Yeah, I would say that the gap's not super noticeable, but I do feel like there is a noticeable gap. Like, like it is interesting though, because as a blue steel player, when I play, there are a lot of times when I'm playing, like sitting down for a match, where I kind of like, I'm glad I'm on the draw for game 1, because like it gives me a little bit better knowledge of what I should ink, and like, which is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like I have that kind of take, but at the same time, it makes my mulligan so much harder, because like into a blind matchup, you're not really sure what cards are relevant or what cards are not relevant. And so then you're kind of like, I find myself kind of just making myself dizzy trying to hedge for all these different situations. But then then it gets kind of balanced out by being able to say, oh, I go second, then I know what I can, this is not important, so I can ink this in this matchup or something. So I do kind of like that a little bit.
Well, and I think also the data sort of supports that the 2-game format is functional, because of the amount of people that are winning 2-0, right? Like there's a significant, so it didn't just devolve into this, well, everybody goes 1-1 because being on the play is so imbalanced.
I think it took a bit of calibration. People had to get into the practice habit of practicing into 2-game format, and after that,
What's that feel like, winning 2-0? If somebody could
Couldn't
tell
be
me, in the comments,
In
let
the
me
comments,
know.
Tag the two of us.
Yeah.
Couldn't be me.
How's that feel to do well?
Oh, that's a little disingenuous. I did go undefeated my first 3 rounds of my first set championship.
Oof. Like completely like undefeated games too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. I'm so good at this.
Ka-chow.
Ka-chow. All right. So that gives me an opportunity to kind of talk about something that we've been involved in via social media, right?
Yeah.
So there is a acquaintance on the internet that you had reached out to who was soliciting interview questions or answers to interview questions on Twitter.
Yeah. So another creator in the space, Illumination Rich is what his Twitter name is. His handle is Hero606V2 or something. Well,
Yeah, nicely done.
Yeah,
We'll tag him in
yeah,
the
the memory.
description. Good
yeah,
job.
no Dory over here.
I was gonna jump in and help, but no Dory over here. All Marlin.
No, yeah. So, when we started following people on social media and was trying to kind of make our way into this space, I saw that he posted. I'm actually assuming he's a he. I don't know at this point, but I saw that they posted that they were looking for creators that were willing to be a part of an interview series that they were conducting. So we reached out. They sent us a bunch of questions.
Great questions.
Yeah.
Really cool questions.
Really put us on the hot spot. So I think what we're going to try to do is for the next few episodes, we're going to kind of sprinkle in some of these questions. And so you could check out whenever they make their post. We'll retweet it or whatever. And you could check out the full thread as soon as they compile everything. But if you want to hear our long-winded version, not edited for paper versions of the answers.
What we're kind of chewing over as a trio of what we think about some of these questions. They're awesome to talk about. They're awesome to think about. And one of the first ones that we're going to talk about is about competitive aspirations. The question from Illumination Rich was, Michael and Blake, with your competitive background in Magic, how do you find the transition to Lorcana? Are there still any skills or strategies you've carried over? or not are there still, are there any skills or strategies you've carried over, and how does the competitive atmosphere compare?
How does the competitive atmosphere compare? The one thing that that I have likened is so far is that I feel like the DLC that I attended in Dallas felt very much like a GP in Magic. It was just like a large
A Grand Prix.
Grand Prix, yeah. I don't know if they still have those anymore. I've been out of the competitive Magic scene for a little bit, but it was, large, multi-thousand player event, and you go and you try to get X2, I think was the record. If you have X2 or better record, you qualify for day 2. Day 2, you played another grinding amount of Swiss rounds, and then they cut to a top 8, and then you play for the big prize at the end, right? So
How is that different from a Pro Tour qualifier?
a Pro Tour qualifier was generally smaller from when I played, maybe 64 people, maybe 128 people. And the winner got an invite to the Pro Tour. And so there's like only like one kind of bobble at the end. And it usually took place in like a very lengthy grind in one day in a sweaty, unventilated basement or warehouse.
It was a high school gymnasium.
Yeah, gymnasium.
When our old firm started it, yeah.
Yeah, so and those were like hyper competitive, right? Like Blake, you probably speak a little bit better to this. I didn't attend very many, but those were like the most competitive players were there trying to become Pro Tour qualifiers versus GPs where it was a lot more like a con environment, and all sorts of people would be there, cosplayers and artists and casual players, competitive players, whoever, just being there to hang out with friends, right?
Right. PTQs were the size of essentially like a regional pre-release.
Or like a set champs on steroids. Set champs with more consequences.
Yeah. And that's a really good way of putting it, because the goal of going to a PTQ really was to earn that qualification, right? So you had the most stressful day no matter what, right? And really, in a weird way, we talk about this a lot. It's your community really helped you a lot, because if you just O2 dropped, right, you're still there for the rest of the day. There was a long time where you just going to PTQs, somebody from our group top 8'd. It didn't matter. So, you drove 4 hours to get to the event. Somebody was going to top 8. It was 24 hours later, you finally returned home. Wow. So the level of competition, but it's not even just the level of competition, right? Because when you talk about the level of competition, you're really talking about the overall skill of the player, which isn't necessarily there in a PTQ. But the sweatiness of a PTQ is like far more than anything else, right? It's like it doesn't get worse than a PTQ.
I didn't participate in many of them just because like that was a level of like sweatiness and like competition that like I don't really think I was good enough, but like that sweatiness, I was like I'm not prepared for this. And so I guess going back to my thought is that like the DLCs felt a lot like GPs. Like they're like mini conventions, and like from the sounds of it, Vegas was even better with artists being there. We didn't have any artists in Dallas, but having that ability to just kind of go and hang out with your friends, whether you're participating in the event or not, that was really cool. And so those vibes were really cool. The only thing that I'm really a proponent of, and that I really, really hope happens sooner rather than later, is an official like judging program. And in Magic they call it rules enforcement level guideline, but it was essentially tiers of competitiveness, right? They had for those that are unaware, they had casual, competitive, and professional RELs. And basically when you signed up for an event, you went to an event, it was classified under one of the three, and that meant that essentially was like, how sweaty is this event? And and it gave you a good guideline, though. Even at the rules level, the official documentation level, there were different ways to handle different infractions, right? Certain infractions would come with a minor penalty under one enforcement level, or a more severe penalty in a more competitive level. And it would just be kind of nice get that established in Lorcana, because I think that there's like this vague blob right now kind of happening where I think a lot of people are unsure of how casual or how competitive to take events. And like, how do I approach this? Like, am I allowing people to maybe take things back, or am I saying, oh, or is this so competitive that, hey, if you did that, like you removed your hand from the chess piece, it's done. Like you can't take that back type deal. So I'm hoping that gets established at some point, and they say like, okay, your locals are like casual, set champs, even maybe set champs are casual, right? Like, hey, let's all chill out a little bit, right? Then that like it gives a way for everybody to kind of just align a little bit more cleanly.
Expectations.
Right. Yeah. Like an expectation alignment of just saying like, hey, it's not just me saying like everybody gets sweaty because we're competing for Mirabelle. It's officially like Ravensburger saying, okay, this is either going to be a competitive thing or not as competitive thing. Right.
Right. And I think that like for people's personal progression, holding locals every week to the exact same standard as DLCs with $30,000 cards on the line.
Right.
While I understand for our judging friends in the room, I understand rules are rules are rules. There are people who are coming into the game with a different set of expectations and a different set of experience and skill level and all of these things. And if we're creating a place for everyone, they need an opportunity to learn those rules. Right. And it's not just like pro tour level intensity every Thursday night.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would hope.
Yeah, no, I fundamentally think that the key word here is that expectations, and being able to define the expectations would go a long way for a lot of things. And I agree with you, Michael, that the DLC, it's very much that GP vibe.
Yeah.
Like very much so. And to go a little bit further, the level of event, the way that it was run was wonderful.
Yeah, I agree.
Like
shout
top
out to PBG.
tier. They were not figuring things out on the fly. It was solid the entire weekend through. Yep. There were a couple of hiccups, but these were not hiccups because of like event staff.
Organizational.
It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with like players being shady that would throw things sideways, right? Mm-hmm. So, it was an absolutely wonderful experience. But again, I kind of agree with you where, there is a certain sort of expectation that is not known specifically. And I think everybody kind of comes in with their own expectations, but it's really Ravensburger and or the tournament organizers that need to set up what the expectations are. It's up to them, not specifically the player base at that point in time.
Yeah, it's an overall organized play process improvement that we can probably expect in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
For me personally, that would help a lot because I struggle. I struggle personally dialing it back a little bit. And so it's very helpful to know what level of intensity am I coming to this event with because of its predefined bracket that it's falling under, right? I don't need to come to this event with the same intensity that I go to another event if I know that, right? And so having those definitions just helps somebody like me to adapt to that.
I think it helps everybody though. It helps newer players as well because there is a set guideline of expectations that they would also need to meet as well. Right. And so we've talked about one of the things that I would like to see is the idea of the DLC being split into two different functions. Right now you have attendee and competitive badges. Mm-hmm. I would like to see the competitive aspect kind of just be spun off on its own so that you can just have a 5,000 player attendee experience. And maybe that does come with a different level of expectations where maybe the rounds are actually even longer for beginner players so that we can go over the aspect of like teaching them sequencing or, you know, why this doesn't make sense. The idea of what happens when you select a ward character with an action, right?
Yeah, I see why they're combined, right? When you look at the structure of the event, there are a very small percentage of players who go on to day 2, which is actually like day 3 if you count pre-registration, but I call it day 2. There are a few people who make it into Sunday, and so there is always going to be a side event culture at DLCs, regardless of whether there are attendee only DLCs or competitor only DLCs, because there has to be something for those cut players to do on the second day.
And I fully agree with that. I also understand the fact that, you know, this is the first year, right? This is the experience, right? Everybody is welcome to come to these DLCs right now because, you know, if you just want to experience it, if this is your first TCG as a whole, like going to a DLC, it's amazing. Like you went as somebody who worked there and still ended up having an absolute blast just because of the atmosphere and the people.
Yeah, I'm super sad that I'm missing Seattle. I am not sad enough to cancel the trip that I've planned for a year, but I am sad that I'm missing it. And shout out to all of the folks who are going to be working DLC Seattle. I know that you're going to knock it out of the park, but yeah, that was a great experience for me. It was great to see like a family come through the queue, and it was like mama's playing main tournament, dad and kiddo are playing side events, and I was like, how cool that you were all able to get badges to be able to do this and that kind of thing. So while I understand exactly what you're talking about splitting competitive and casual, number one, they're already going to be doing a degree of that with the quest thing that we still don't have new information on yet, but that we're like eagerly waiting for.
Oh yeah.
I think that those two communities can coexist in the same building. I wish the buildings were bigger so that we could have as many new friends in the room together, but I do, as a counterpoint, enjoy having attendee and competitors together.
Okay, so I feel like I need to clarify that I am not advocating for specifically separating them. For the aspect of separation.
Right.
I am specifically saying this because if the building can hold 5,000 people.
Yeah. If it's
have 5,000 competitors and have 5,000 like casual, like I'm just saying like create a better space for the subgroups.
Sure.
You can even still have the DLC in its current iteration that has both competitive and attendees. Mm-hmm. But I would also like to see them lean into, hey, this is our quest space. It's going to hold 4,000 people. We're just going to have a great, crazy time, but it doesn't have that golden Mickey sweaty status to it.
I mean, that was exactly what Mike was talking about when he was like, it helps me properly calibrate my expectations. I know exactly what the set of expectations are walking into it.
Yes.
And I think what Blake is also kind of talking about is having a large scale, more casual event, just so everybody could experience the community and the con like vibes, and then having a large scale sweaty event so that those people can, the competitive people can really get their competitive edge out and like do their competitive stuff, and then not have to necessarily trickle down into the other spaces, or even like so that they can also enjoy the other spaces in a more casual vibe, right? So I think we answered that, like that second part of the question of like how we feel the vibes are of the constructed space and where we think it was going. To kind of jump back to the first part of the question, which is, what skills carried over.
Great point.
None at all, because I was bad at Magic and I'm still bad at Lorcana. No, I thought about this question for a while, and for me, I don't think that there was anything necessarily card game specific that I carried over other than generic muscle memory. And by that I mean like how to shuffle physical cards, how to appropriately use my play space, keep things clean. This is where my deck is, this is where my discard is, my characters are here, my ink is here, etc. I played somebody, and this is not a call out, but I played somebody on this previous set championships who said, hey, I'm brand new, I just started playing this. I was a Hearthstone player before this, so they played online TCGs, online card games, and he said to me, I gotta look up shuffling tutorials. Like I've never shuffled cards before, and so like I was like, oh wow, that's crazy. Like something that I haven't really even thought about. Just like the basic mechanics. It for granted. Yeah, just the basic mechanics of being able to, because we play with sleeves, just being able to mash the cards in the corners.
Oh my gosh, I think I saw this.
Yeah, like he was really struggling to kind of shuffle, and he was like, oh, you can shuffle my deck if you want. I'm just kind of doing this thing. And I was like, hey, no problem. I was like, and I kind of coached him.
Sweetheart.
I find this really fascinating because I was teaching somebody as well at Set Champs. It's somebody who was playing very well.
Yep.
Right.
But just could not get the grasp of like how to shuffle in real life.
Right, yeah, and I think that's because other people come from like Hearthstone, like online spaces. There's so many games now, right? When Magic was kind of in its birth, it was the only one, and the only other experience you would have had was like shuffling a deck of cards. So pre-sleeves, like that's why all those Power 9 are beat, but
that is correct,
right?
Yeah,
but mechanically, like I don't know that I necessarily carried anything over from playing Magic or playing other card games, but like strategically stuff like being able to predict, okay, your opponent is on playing Ruby on 6 ink. Their next turn they're gonna have 7 ink, which means be prepared is possible, right? Like just having that foresight or thinking strategically, I think that those skills carry over.
The wrath of God trauma kicking in.
Yeah, or like the concept of like overextending, right? Is a term, or like we've used the term here before. Who's the beat down? That concept. Those are like generic, broad scale concepts that have come from just playing video games, strategy games, board games in general, coming from that strategic mind that have helped me kind of learn Lorcana a little bit. But even then, the game is so different that in my learning phase of learning Lorcana, there was so much I had to learn as far as using ink as a resource. And Blake, you called me out on it the other day. I ink, again, because I play Blue Steel, I ink everything all the time. And because I can just cast a whole new world and I can refill my hand. But playing other decks, knowing when to stop inking and like all sorts of things. There's so many things in Lorcana that can't be, there isn't an equivalent. And so.
Yeah. And I talked about this because Bloomburrow dropped, and Bloomburrow as a set had a broad appeal. So there were first-time Magic players who wanted to look into like commander decks and things like that. And it was like, hey, Britt, you can teach me how to play Magic. I was like, yeah, I've played Magic for years. It's fine. And then I sat down and I was like, oh man, how does a mulligan work in Magic? I was like, oh man, how do I tell him what hand to keep? And I was just like, oh, I fundamentally have Lorcana brain now. I just fundamentally, I don't play Magic the same way that I used to.
I can speak to that. It's the best example. So when, I want to say when we were driving to Vegas with my roommate, he was talking about the whole not drawing on the first turn, or like if you're on the draw, you get to draw, right? If you're on the play, you don't draw. And I stopped and I had to think about it for 5 minutes. I've been playing TCGs for so long with that. Just that's the muscle memory that like Michael's talking about, where
Yeah.
it doesn't even dawn on me that when you're on the play, you don't draw. It just is. Like, it's such a fact of my being.
If you, who wants to be a millionaire, me and asked me whether or not a Magic player draws on the first turn, could not with confidence tell you at this point. I just realized it right now sitting here. I was like,
I think you only do it in Commander, but
Let's
I
go.
don't know if that's true.
Well,
or not.
and it's just one of those things that I just had that sort of like crisis of like, well, am I cheating? Am I drawing every time I'm on the play?
right.
I have since found out that no, I don't. I still play it correctly.
Yeah.
I just don't think about it.
Yeah.
It's not even in the catalog of things to do. And that's part of it, right? Fundamentally, from a certain aspect of setting up and like advancing through your turns, Lorcana is so similar to MTG, right? There is zero difference between untap, upkeep, and draw between ready, set, draw. It's the same thing. It's the same concept.
We haven't told this story on the podcast, but my first set championship, should we? Never mind. You open the door. I'm going to go through
We're
it.
going for it.
We're going, baby. Let's go.
Were you playing Clue?
No, she was playing Amethyst Ruby.
I-
Is this the one? Is
I'm
this
gonna
one
Blake tell
where
the
you
story.
you super swept through everything?
My only
Oh,
time.
This
My
is
crowning.
all. Yeah. This
No,
is,
somebody
this is all I
turned to
know.
me. Somebody turned to me the other day and was like, "Remember when we did a lot of practice and you were really good at this game?" And I was like, "When?" and I was like, "When?" And they were like, "Oh, like around Inklands." I was like,
When we were
"Damn." Like not now. Remember when you were good at this game? It was
Do you
so
remember,
funny.
or did the Alzheimer kick in
No,
already?
Jeez. No, it wasn't. It was not even in a mean way. It was in a like. Remember how good you did? It was like in an encouraging way. But I was also like, when was I ever good? And I'm like Inklands. I was like, oh, okay. No, my first set championship game, me, full anxiety brain, sat down across from my round one, game one stranger. One of the well, I guess it was like more strangers back then, but like seemingly in a room full of friends. I was sitting across from this person I didn't know, and I was on my second turn and didn't think about it, but I narrate my steps because that's with ADHD, it's like I can hear things better if I'm it's just I can be procedural if I say it out loud. And especially back then, especially when we were talking about Queen's Castle being newer and locations being newer and stuff like that, like I just really was on top of it. And I said untap, and the person across from me goes, "Ugh, a filthy Magic player." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he was like, "Untap isn't a thing in this game. That's how I knew you played Magic." I was like, "You caught me. You caught busted. I played Magic and I still say untap." So, what is it?
I said it in a podcast.
Yeah, he
like
kept
one of
saying
the episodes.
tapping
I
things, and
said
I don't know what he's talking
then
about.
somebody
He
was like,
means
"You guys were
exerting.
like exert,"
ready.
and I was like,
"Oh, yeah.
filthy casual."
Right, filthy Magic player." And I was like, but yeah, so they are functionally identical, but the vernacular, some folks are very particular about, apparently.
And the thing is, I'm okay with that.
Oh, I am too.
As long as it's that tongue in cheek, like, hey, just a reminder. Like, I'm totally down with that. Because realistically, when I'm playing, I want to use the proper vernacular.
It's the same thing with graveyard versus whatever discard.
Discard,
It's discard now.
banish, or
We don't.
otherwise.
We don't say KILL.
Yes.
It's not. We don't say that events fire. We say that
Oh,
they
really?
launch. Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that one.
What's
Gotta-
the other
gotta
one?
make everything different. Set
I don't know.
champs instead of
You
store
can't target
champs.
things. You choose things.
You can't
Oh.
target things?
Well, you
It's
don't target. You
choose.
choose.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
choose.
Chosen is the
Yeah,
word.
you
It's
choose.
target in.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know.
You filthy Magic player.
Filthy Magic player.
But it's like, I mean, it's also different, right? Because the rules, like in Magic, I mean, this is like inside baseball. Well, not that deep, but like you can't play a spell without targeting something. But in Lorcana,
Lorcana,
you could just play a spell into the ether, into the illuminary,
into the ink. No, inkwell
Into
specific.
the bag.
Yeah, like you could
Into
just
the-
you could just play a spell if there are even if there's nothing for you to choose.
They're not
right?
even called spells.
Oh.
They're actions,
Actions.
Oh,
and
you're
songs.
right. You can sing songs.
Songs.
You can sing songs.
without.
Because it's the let the storm rage on, right? If you want to, you can let the storm rage on with nobody, so you can flute it for a lore.
I did not know that you could do that, but that's crazy. Like that's
Shout out to our Steel Song player who.
But you can't draw a card.
You do
yeah,
draw a card.
you draw the card.
You have to finish the function of the card.
Yeah.
So if there are no characters in play, you could just cast Let the Storm Rage
Yeah,
On.
baby.
Correct.
You can.
Sure
sorry,
can.
you may play. You may play or sing. Wait, no. If you're singing it, you have a character.
The caveat to that is that if there is a character in play, it has to choose that. So
Right.
you can't just, I have no characters. I'm going to play this card and not choose one of my characters.
Okay.
But if there's nothing on the board,
Yeah.
it's the same concept with Popsicle being able to heal nothing.
Correct.
You can pop the
Heal,
popsicle for nothing.
yeah, just heals your broken dreams.
Right.
It
The
heals
face
your
that he made
likelihood.
when he said
I
that,
literally, I was
just
just broken. I was like, all roasted.
Yeah, I was like, wow, those
Wow.
that's a flash into Blake's childhood or something. Just heals your broken dreams. This
Heal-
blank stare of a face.
Heals your day 2 aspirations. Ouch.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I kind of have waxed on about it a little bit. Is there anything that you think carry over from your experience in previous card games, or is it about the same?
It's really just the same, right? It's I think you made a really good point about sort of like location of everything, right? One of the things that we struggle with, I guess, as a community, especially when our community streams online regularly.
The clearly defined board state.
Yeah, the inking, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like the ink, some people have different ink piles and I try and make it representative. But even I had a game in the top 8 against somebody where I had so much ink on the board where we were both like, okay, hold on, let me set my hand aside and deal with this, because it was impossible for me to keep it like really well organized. Like, it's nice when you have 8 ink and it's in your little 2 piles, or 9 ink and it's in your piles of 3.
I'm a Ruby
But when
Amethyst
you
player
have
who does no wrong.
17
Clearly defined
ink,
piles.
it's like
Degenerate.
there's no level of pile that doesn't take up way too much space that's not bleeding into some other space.
Degenerate Sapphire players, the both of you.
I mean, well, and I have that same issue too
played the 5th.
with characters for whatever reason. Like, I put enough characters and or items onto the board
Yeah.
where that top level of area is just taken up, so I have to start stacking things.
Normalized,
Which, of course,
practicing
is-
on airplane flight trays.
Yes. And making everything completely known. Yes.
Does that mean you're going to be pro ink tokens?
No, because it doesn't change anything.
Oh, okay. They're taking up just as much space.
It takes up just as much space. Yeah. But, you know, those little aspects, right? The ability to be able to sort of like think in an advanced strategic manner, because we've been trained to do that. We've been trained for expectations of what your opponent is going to play. And we kind of talked about this a little bit last episode, where it's like, you know, a lot of players are playing just one deck. This is their deck. Like, basically you as well. Even if it's bad into the meta, this is the deck you play. But, you know, when you're only playing that one deck, you don't have that intrinsic value of understanding how a deck is supposed to win when you're not playing that deck as well. So there's a lot better
Understanding alternate win conditions from other decks.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So from that perspective, you tend to just follow your lines against what you expect to be their lines would be. And it isn't always that case.
Right.
Whereas, you know, with 30 years of other TCG experience, you kind of gain that perspective of like, okay, what else is there? And this is very much like influenced by, I would say, limited formats in MTG, because now the entire card pool from that set is an expected, like, okay, so now you're trying to figure out, okay, what combat trick do they have? And you're literally going through the encyclopedia of that set being like, can I even remember what it is? Those little aspects like really do translate very well. And secondarily, this is also why I kind of have my approach of I fundamentally disagree with being able to like their stance on writing anything down. Because again, like you can't write who's on the play, right? Like from a letter of the law, like you can't indicate
Not even letter, like that's just the rule.
It's the rule, right?
Yeah.
But also, again, if we're supposed to be inclusive, even in a competitive environment, like holding an 8-year-old to the same standard as a 28-year-old on trying to be able to remember cards that you got to see, I can understand saying, look, you can't write down what somebody has inked. But if I've seen your hand, I should be able to write that down.
Interesting take.
The cognitive aspect of somebody who has like a fully developed brain versus somebody who's younger and still learning, I think it just puts them at a disadvantage, and I don't really disagree
Tough luck,
with
kid.
that.
I think
Thanks for the mirror. Bro.
It does. It really feels like a get good aspect of things when it's so unnecessary.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Is there space for a juniors league? Different subject entirely.
Ooh, interesting.
Interesting.
Would fully support it.
I mean, there was one in Magic. There was one in Pokemon. There. I mean, I could see it. That'd be cool.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
But I think this also goes back to like what you were talking about a little bit, right? Where you were saying last episode how you feel like it's just a matter of time until somebody catches up. And like I think that's true. It's like the whatever perceived lead we have in this game, and like, you know, if anybody else out there wants to think that I'm better than them at this game for whatever reason, like it's only because of the years of like practice we have of like predicting that Be Prepared's coming, right? And like as soon as other people, everybody else kind of catches up to that, like, oh, okay, 7 ink, Be Prepared, like don't play my 8th character onto this board. Like as soon as everybody else gets that, like and along with some other things, like that advantage that we bring from the other card games is effectively null, right?
And arguably, there will come a point where somebody's TCG fluency is such that Lorcana is their primary language, right? And so it'll even go beyond that, where like none of the preconceived notions that any of us have from another, they'll just be. I mean, the biggest fluent in Lorcana by itself,
right? The biggest one that I've come to realize recently is the 60 card deck thing.
Sure.
Right? Because it's been so ingrained in my head from Magic the Gathering. And we had time limitations, whatever. We'll talk about it real briefly. But because it's been so ingrained in my head that 60 cards is the right number, but then recently reading online, discussing amongst our circles, coming to the realization that because cards, there's like not in Magic, there's no lands, right? So if your card is inkable, it still has use.
Yes.
And so the 61st card in Magic, if it was only like deal 2 damage to a red creature, and all it did was deal 2 damage to a red creature, and if they don't have that, it's a dead card. It does nothing, right? But in this game, if Hideaway, if you don't have any locations or items, it's still ink.
Yep.
I still get to do something with it.
Such a good point. Yeah.
And so that's totally like that preconceived notion was actually a detriment.
To add to that, yeah, because we really had to reevaluate this. We were hard on 60. Like we were having a great time joking about it for a while, and then I want to say you just kind of casually mentioned, well, like maybe 62 is right, and then it forced me to really start thinking about it. So to add to what you're saying, there's also no sideboarding in this game.
Yeah.
Right.
So you want to make sure your deck has an answer if possible. Granted, if you can make sure to have all those answers in 60 cards, do so. Yeah. Right? But if you can't and you're trying to figure out, oh, I've got 61 or 62, just do a bunch of testing with 61 or 62 and see how it works. right? I mean, we've seen decks go as high as 70 something and do well.
Yeah, there have been multiple day 2s with 70 plus decks, right?
I'm pretty sure the only decks that have had 70 also had a whole new world, right? So you're
Seems
seeing
good.
a significant you have an action in your deck that allows you to see a significant amount of cards. So and if what you're digging for is an answer, having the answer in your deck actually matters.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so since we're kind of wrapping it up a little bit for this episode, why don't we go back? Because I don't think we did it, but hot take. What deck is winning DLC Seattle?
Actual predictions?
Yeah, actual predictions. Let's do that real quick, and we'll sign off after that.
I'll go third.
Oh, you want to cheat on our answers? Okay.
As if I would want to cheat off of your takes.
I feel like I need to go third.
Okay.
Well, you guys duke it out. I'm picking blue steel because, surprise, surprise, I'm picking blue steel.
No, I think that I'm trying to think of who. So we had who were in the top 2. It was James was on purple green.
Yes, Amethyst.
Sorry, not to out you. We'll bleep your name.
Amye.
Gerpel.
Okay.
Gerpel. It was Gerpel versus Emerald Steel.
I thought it was Gerpel versus Gerpel in the finals.
Was it Gerpel versus Gerpel?
Yeah.
I should know that. That's like my pet deck right now. I don't think Gerpel's gonna take it. I think there'll be a Gerpel in top 8. I don't know. I think Ruby Amethyst is gonna get outplayed by Green Steel again.
Oh, you think green steel finals?
Yeah.
Or green steel win?
See, I don't necessarily
like it.
have that take specifically
like
because
it.
going into Vegas, right? Emerald Steel was kind of a dark horse, right? It was a known entity, but everybody kind of like forgotten about it.
No, I thought Steel Song was gonna be. I thought Steel Song was gonna eat
everybody thought that Steel Song, and so that's where I'm saying I think now that Ruby Amethyst has the knowledge that is going to be a part of the field, it can now adapt, and I think it adapts to that deck even better than it did the Bucky version.
Yeah, because there's no Bucky.
Yep. So I would not be surprised to see Ruby Amethyst do well. I don't necessarily think it's specifically going to win. If I had to guess, right? I think Emerald Steel is likely to be the top deck, right, by percentage. So
we're talking ratios.
15 to 25%. I always have to do the ratios, if nothing else. I think Ruby Sapphire still competes with Emerald Steel. I think Emerald Steel also. It's a very complicated deck to pilot into Mulligan for. So it can have a lot of bad sort of draws on its own, where it just kind of fizzles. It just doesn't do what it wants for Emerald Steel. So I think in that
time I would get a game off of them.
Yeah. So I think Ruby Sapphire can still compete. I think it's still 15 to 25% of the field. I think we see a pretty decent resurgence or I don't know, initiation of Emerald Amethyst. I think that ends up being 10 to 20% of the field.
Ooh, that's an even hotter take on Gerpel than I have.
Because I think then Ruby Amethyst also takes the other 10 to 20% at that point in time, and then everything else falls between that like 2 to 8% for the most part. Yeah.
Okay, and then which one did you have winning?
Oh, it's so hard. Din. Ruby Sapphire is winning.
What if Din is not there? Still Ruby Sapphire?
Oh, man, that's rough. No, I can actually see Emerald Amethyst winning.
Oh, okay. So he's got Gerpel or Din, and you've got Emerald Steel?
I've got Emerald Steel, but I'm always riding for Gerpel.
Okay. So Gerpel and Emerald Steel, Gerpel and Ruby Sapphire, and then I'm the only one on the Blue Steel train. All right, fair enough.
Sounds about right, to be honest.
All right then.
Do we think I think it's going to be all the usual suspects. I think the people who tend to do all the DLC. That's the coldest take ever.
I would like to see Bivens
Yeah,
do
that'd be
well,
cool.
right? Because he hasn't hit an invite yet. I'd like to see him hit an invite.
Well, there you go.
But I think one of the reasons why I specifically, not that I'm like his biggest fan or anything, but when we look at the entirety of sort of the competitive scene as it's been through DLCs and or like other events, right? Bivens has shown up with sort of like the off meta consistently, or the budget deck, right? He's going out there and he's putting receipts down on, hey, look, you don't have to spend $500 on a deck to be competitive.
Bivens is a cool player. I'd like to see him do well.
Yeah. So, and then for, the sad, finish of what ended up happening at Vegas, where he went in as the number 1 seed and kind of got bounced out in the first round. I would like to see a real redemption cycle for him. So I'm rooting for him.
Sounds good.
Great forecast. So, okay. So if it wasn't blue steel, what is your second deck?
Yeah, you got to choose it too.
Why do I have to choose the second one?
Because we all chose the second one.
Yeah, but I'm confident in my answer. I'm not wishy-washy.
Okay, I'm not confident in your answer.
If I have to pick another one, it's Plu.
Blurple?
Plu.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Enchanted Inkwell with Britt, and only Britt, forever, for the rest of this time, because they're both fired.
We've really got to hope that Blue Steel doesn't win, though.
He'll be...